they've got to go back to waiting. They've got to wait for the sun to spend enough time in the sky to melt the ice pack so the ship can be free. That's a lot of stuff to melt. And of course, the melting of the ice pack starts to bring new issues. When the ice pack is solid, it is solid and the ship is safe. It's like an almond in a cake. Yeah. But when the cake starts to break up, the almond gets mashed around a little bit. And so the real danger is as the ice begins to break up into smaller flows, which can move on the tides and the swells with the wind and start to crush the ship. And the ship is not going to stop the ice. It's going to move however it likes. So, here we go. We're waiting. Again, we have to wait all summer because the sun doesn't really have enough of an impact until February. Yeah, so we've waited a whole summer. But they've been here over a year. And now the problems happen. They can see in the distance what they call a water sky, which means that it's a dark line on the sky, on the horizon, which indicates the presence of water. The opposite is called ice blink. When you can see, when you're on the water, you can see a white or bright patch on the horizon. It's called ice blink, so the presence of ice. The opposite is a water sky. If they can see a water sky, they know there's water close. After a while, they can see a lead start to open up. And a lead is a good sized break between ice flows. Yeah, something big enough maybe to get the ship into. But it's 500 odd metres away. So Amundsen brilliantly thinks, we've got 2 big ice stores left over from the ship's sealing days tucked away down the front. Let's get them out and let's start cutting our way to that lead. So that's what they do. 4 hours on, 4 hours off. Rotating crews, big ice stores, 2 metre thick ice shelf that they're cutting through, except for the edges right up against the ship. It's more like 5 metres thick, and out towards the lead it's, pardon me, thicker again. That's a Cook photograph by Cook taken there. Brutal work, but they had to do it. So this is great. They're cutting a channel and it's working. They're actually getting ice to move out into the lead and they're creating a gap. You'll notice Belgica is facing away from the picture, which means they're going to have to reverse the ship along the lead they're creating. That's going to be difficult. And then something happens. The swell starts to come in and move the ship, move the ice pack. And they're like, oh, this is great. It's going to start to break up, which it does, except that it breaks like a big piece of pizza. And so a new crack opens up over here and pushes this big triangular piece of, or pizza wedge shaped piece of ice and pushes it across and closes the channel they've just built. Not only does it do that, but it pushes the ice onto the rudder of the ship, putting a massive amount of pressure on the rudder, and if you have no rudder, you cannot sail. So now we're really up against it. This is crunch time now. Amundsen, again, we have dynamite in the hold of the ship that we haven't used. We should blast our way out. De Gerlache, who's been pretty much on his deathbed since the start of this whole thing, is now springing to life. Yep, he's realised, yep, the seal meat's the one, I've got to eat that. He's kind of back up and running. He's a bit of a risk taker because he really wants to succeed. He's like, yep, we're gonna go with the dynamite. Okay, so they go and get the dynamite out of the hold of the ship. It's been in there for over a year. It's been cold. It's been through the tropics. It's degraded. They pull it out. They've actually got half a ton of dynamite, which is a lot of dynamite. They pull it out. Most of it's buggered. It's powdered. The detonators are corroded. They've got no sense of how powerful it actually is anymore. They don't know if the detonators are going to work. They don't know how close to put it to the ship. They don't know anything. They're just taking wild guesses about this, but they make a pile of dynamite in the snow about that far from the ship, near the rudder. Yeah, they risk blowing their rudder up. They risk sinking their ship, but they have to because otherwise they're stuck again and they won't survive another winter. They do the thing with the dynamite. They make the cord thing. They get the little plunger thing that you do with dynamite. They hunker down. They push the lever down. Ice, snow, blow into the air, bits of timber and paint flecks are falling down on the crew as they shelter from this, and they're just like, oh my God. They poke their heads up from behind the mound of ice there behind it, and it has worked beautifully. They have blown a hole in the ice that not only relieved the pressure on the rudder, but it was big enough to turn the ship around, which they do manually, and they then proceed to try and barge their way out of the crack of ice that's formed. Now, the ship hasn't moved for over a year. They don't really know how strong it still is, and they've got this fissure of ice to move through. And so they fire the engines up. I'm making it sound much simpler than it was, but I've got limited time. They fire the engines up, and their only option really is to charge the ship at the end of the fissure and try and barge it apart, and then reverse it again, and then go forwards again, and they just keep doing that. And they keep doing that until they get to the very end of the lead, where there's a big ice chunk, I guess, not quite a berg, but a chunk at the very end before they break through into the lead, and there are only options to try and barge through it. So once again, they are backs to the wall, they back all the way up, they get as much speed as they can down the channel, and they crash into the ice chunk at the end of it, and they get out. Incredibly. They make it out into the lead, they follow that lead, it turns into another lead, the leads get bigger, and they eventually sail out of the ice pack. And then they sail home, just like the plan said. The ice melts, we sail out, and we sail home. Incredibly, they sail home. To a hero's welcome. This is the Belgica in Antwerp. De Gerlache is now a hero. He's come home a bit of a national hero. Got her further south, the first wintering over in Antarctica. Incredible. He becomes like an admiral consultant to the Belgian Navy's 40 kilometres of coastline. Cook. He goes on to claim to have made it to the North Pole first, soon after to be counterclaimed by Robert Peary, who a week later claimed that he made it first. And that went on to become one of the greatest controversies of the polar exploration era, and it's still hotly debated today. Amundsen, yep, he did some stuff too, pretty sharp. But really, this expedition kicked off, or blew the whistle, for the start of the great game. It was the heroic era of polar exploration between pretty much 1899 and 1922, when Shackleton died. It was an amazing expedition just for that. Cool. I will, of course, take questions.
So, there were never any consequences for de Gerlache?
Hang on one sec.
There were never any consequences for de Gerlache between making that crazy decision at the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question, what were the consequences for de Gerlache with making that nuts decision to turn south? So I think we probably owe it to Cook and Amundsen, who were the true leaders, and I think the crew must have recognised that de Gerlache was, operating on an entirely different set of values and didn't really care about their lives, and they were probably quite happy when he went to bed with scurvy and stayed there. It was Cook and Amundsen who got these guys through the long winter night, and I think that's that. Once you start doing something for yourself to make your life better, everything just gets okay again. I wasn't there, but that's my read on it. Yeah. Someone else? How? How did he pop out? He popped out vertically. They slid him in vertically, and he just he can't have gone all the way through because he just popped straight up again. And I ostracized like an iceberg momentarily until the bag he was in filled with water and pulled him down again. Gruesome and grotesque.
A question about the construction of the ship. Was it strictly a wooden hull or was it iron bound?
No. Construction of the ship, wooden ship. Entirely, well, apart from the engine and the prop. Yep. But other than that, wooden ship, an old wooden sealer that had auxiliary engines refitted to it. Yeah, so these ships often used a thing called greenheart, which I think is an African wood. that is, and they would have a 2-foot thick green heart sheath around the bow of the ship, and that's why they could push into the sea ice like that. That was a really common construction. The Endurance, Shackleton's Endurance, was the same. Old sealers, green heart bow. Yeah.
Why did they take all that dynamite? What were they going to use it for?
Escaping the ice pack. They took the dynamite with the idea that they might have needed to escape the ice pack. No one had done it before. Yeah, so they were actually, even though de Gerlache was possibly not the most inventive guy in the world, he actually had a couple of brilliant ideas, and the dynamite was for potentially getting out of the ice pack.
Why did they use the dynamite sooner?
Because they were so far from the lead, and I think it was only really when they realised, okay, we could actually pull this off, that they got it. Cool. Applaud now. Folks, my strong suggestion would be that you go and get a drink at the bar and then prepare yourself for Sam Coe's krill discussion. I know, and I say that, but I will say that I watched this last trip and I was gripped. It's fantastic, actually. So, doesn't sound like much. He could probably work on his title, but it's really good. Totally worth coming to. But I definitely recommend a beer.